Cool. So today we'll be talking about securing front end. Mostly when we talk about security, right? हम लोग बोलते हैं कि is it cool with English? Cool, right? So whenever we talk about the security thing, we only talk about mostly what I have seen is we talk about like putting firewalls and stuff like that, making network security things and blah blah blah, right? But one of the basic things that we can do to make the front end secure, for example, how many of you are front end developers here? Oh, lot of. Sorry, I'm apologizing. The initially as well. How many of you are backend and cloud? Okay. I mean, so yeah, backend guys. I think they can relate to me. We always have a saying. We always have a saying. We say that never trust anything that is coming from the front end, right? And we know front end is like something. It is very it can be manipulated in general, right? And that's what we want to avoid, right? The real question is we are not here to bitch about why front end is not secure. We are here to talk about how can we make it, how what can we do in general to make sure that at least we can say with some sense that okay, our front end application is a bit more secure in general than it was earlier. But yeah, again, we will still won't touch the front end. But yeah, bit about me. I'm Kuldeep. I'm a lead software engineer at STGI. I am a full stack developer, and today we'll be talking about those things in the next couple of minutes in general. Right? Yeah, front end. We don't. We never trust it, and we should never, right? Why should we? We are the backend guys. So how can we make it more trustworthy? We talk about when we talk about like securing the our whole infra in general. We have a lot of parameters that come into picture, right from making sure that we have the right like routing table configured, we have the right set of ports available, open, the right set of ports that are closed in general, right? Like sort of trapping is coming into infrastructure and all, right? But uh, one of the things that is consuming our infrastructure is also the front end application that we build, right? That is also hitting our back end infrastructure or cloud infrastructure. And whenever we code in the back end, from the back end perspective, we say that, I mean, yeah, just don't touch it, right? We do everything from scratch, and we say that we do all those sorts of validations and stuff like that. So after this session, it won't be like that you will have to remove those validations. I mean, we should not remove those validations. It is just that so that we can say, I mean, these things are something that like the security folks, for example, if you're going for auditing and stuff like that, they like those things more. They're like, okay, you should have those those A plus thing grading in your application and all, right? So yeah. So, any ideas? How can we secure front end? Just couple of ideas. From we have a lot of front end folks, right? So, yeah, validations. What kind of validations in the back end? uh, okay, cool. Okay. Anyone else? Course. Course will just ensure that, I mean, we are accepting requests, right? Anyone else? Yeah. Pardon? Yeah. That is something that we'll have to do by default. Without it, we cannot make APIs, right? I don't think we have much options there, right? I mean, we can't distribute hardware to everyone in general. That will be like very financial thing, right? And the financial department won't approve. So okay, so we'll be talking about basic things. As we said, validating input is one of them, escaping output, and then security headers and all. Then we have content security policy thing, and then we have clickjacking prevention and stuff like that. We have cost policy, we have CSRF, and then we also have permissions policy, right? So these are not the only things that we can do. These are some of the basic ones that is like very common and that we can think of when we are trying when we are talking about preventing making the front end secure in general, right? But today's focus will mostly be around three things that we'll be talking about mostly. How can we use HTTP security headers, how can we define permissions policy, and CSP headers, right? These three things are something that ensures that at least the whatever code is that is getting executed in the browser, right, it is a bit more trustworthy. And why is it so? We'll deep dive into it later in the coming slides, right? So, example, how we just we make applications and all, right? How many of you are aware about phishing? Phishing, phishing, not the fishing, phishing. Right. So what happens in phishing is either they what they do is they make similar pages as that is very look alike. Then there's very similar as our platform, and then they you might have seen very a lot of such WhatsApp messages that claims that okay, just click this link and you will get 100 rupees recharge in your system, right? Yeah, don't click it, it is phishing, right? So why I'm talking about it is that is not the only way of phishing. What sometimes what people do is they will just iframe, we all understand about iframe, right? They will just iframe your website, and we are developer, we know whatever is happening inside the iframe, we can definitely control every bits and pieces of it, right? So what they can do is they can just put the exact exact they can just iframe your whole website, and they can spin it around, and they can share it, circulate in the whole global, and anyone who is accessing it via your website, they can those whose data is in a way is exposed to the hacker in general, right? So why it is there? Because thing is, how do we prevent this, right? I mean, we don't have to do a lot of things. The thing is, the folks are very, very intelligent, and we have around in the web 2 world, we are I think around 15-20 years already, right? So they have already found the solutions. The solutions are, those things are something that we probably are either not aware, or just we don't do it, either because we are lazy, or just the cloud team does not respond to our queries, right? So thing is, with these proper HTTP security headers, what we can do is we can prevent all those basic things in general. For example, how many of you are aware that we can prevent this iframing thing just with, I mean, it is in our control. Were you aware? Like we can control this. Who can iframe me or who cannot iframe me, right? So, for example, that's what these headers are totally about in general. Like security transport, strict transport security ensures that we are doing we are doing communication in HTTPS only, and then we also have X content type options in general. What it ensures is that whatever, for example, if you are trying to load an JavaScript file, right? The content type of that file should be JavaScript. It should not be text or something like that. For example, I'm not sure if you are aware how the tracking system works. I mean, how the analytics things work in general, right? So what they do is, in order to avoid a lot of ad blockers, what they do is that cheekingly they make an API call, and surprisingly, it is not an API call. It does not look like an API call, but it looks more like that you are trying to load an image, and everyone allows loading image from any source, right? And that's how they are trying to load. I mean, if you just copy that URL, and if you paste it in the browser, you will just see a very small pixel of dot I myself have tested it with Facebook analytics or Google analytics and stuff like that. I mean, this is a pretty standard thing that they do, right? So how can we for example, how can we ensure that no one is doing that thing with our with our application engine, right? So we can ensure those things from here. We can define who can iframe us with the xframe options. I can say okay that that the websites of the same origin, they can probably they can iframe me, or the website that no one can iframe me in general, basically, right? Likewise, we have cross-site scripting. We have accesses, right? We can have some prevention of it in the front end itself, so that if you remember, initially we talked about escaping output, right? So that's what it does in general. It helps us in doing those things. And again, access control, allow origin thing, right? So I mean, these are some of the basic headers that probably if we add those headers in our in our front end application, it will probably make our job easier in general. I mean, it will uh, it will strengthen the security of the front end application in general, right? Likewise, we also have the permissions policy thing. How many of how many of you actually set permissions policy right now in your front end applications? Permissions policy. Okay, cool. So let's take an example, right? For example, when we say front end is not trustworthy, right? Why do we say it? Because anyone can just open the console, and then in the console they can write any JavaScript and it will just run. I can do anything literally, right? So what, for example, if you say nowadays the web applications are smart enough that they take permissions for cameras, for microphones, and a lot of other stuff as well, right? So thing is, if you don't have a proper check in place, if you don't have proper proper rules in place, so that what anyone can do is they can simply just open the console of any of the website and they can just run some simple JavaScript. And anyway, JavaScript is anyway visible, right? And they can look at the source code and they can do some sneaky thing as well, right? So what we do is, for those permissions thing, right, we define a permissions policy thing, right? For example, we say, if this is the permission that the browser gives me, so these are the sources, these are the only sources that can consume me. For example, we what we do is also we integrate third party systems in our applications, right? And we use a lot of widgets, we use a lot of libraries and frameworks and stuff like that, so that we can implement those things, right? Now thing is that, behind the bar, behind the name of that particular plugin, anyone can just reuse it to repurpose it for their personal goals and all, right? So we can prevent all those things with this permissions policy header. It is time consuming initially, it is one time setup sort of thing, but it helps us defining those permissions on a very very minute level. For example, I can say that, okay, if the camera is something that I'm going to use, then this is the only plugin that can use it, this is the only source that can use it, and no other source can use it. I can also say that any source that originates apart from my domain should be discarded. They should not be allowed. I should be the only one who should be allowed to do those things, right? So yeah, I mean, this is how we define it. We just have to define a permissions policy response headers in the HTTP response, and it totally relies on the browser, right? The thing is, the reason why I'm saying that, okay, it's not like you just put rules out there and it will automatically follow it. We are behind the assumption that the browser will strictly follow it. And any good browser, for you pick it, any good browser, like be it Mozilla, be it Firefox, be it Chrome, they respect this headers in general. So if in the headers, if I said this permission, this source should not be allowed, then they will make sure that those source are not allowed, even if you try to run the code from console and all. So it standards us, it basically gives us a but hope that probably my front end application is a bit more secure in general. And apart from it, I also have one content security policy header. How many of you have said it or heard about it? Right. So what happens in content security policy header is, it is something, it is more like a dictionary of whatever things that I'm gonna have in my front end side. So I have to define, in my content security policy header, what I do is I define very minute things. For example, if I'm loading a JavaScript, I have to define in the response header itself that these are the only valid sources from where I can from where I can pull up the JavaScript files or CSS files or images, or we also have a very flexibility of controlling whatever we can load inside an iframe as well, right? So what I can do is I don't have to uh, so that no one no one just copies the code from a console and does anything wrong. I just have to define things there. So for example, a lot of time what people a lot of hackers, what they try to do is, they will that is the first one. I mean, we also have tried it at some point of time as a developer as well, right? So we can prevent all those things in general, because the browser is going to respect the response header that we are going to put, and it will make sure that anything that is getting loaded apart from what is mentioned in the rule, it is it is strictly followed in general, right? So yeah, I mean, that's how it be. So we can even tell what are the end API, what are the what are the endpoints API calls that we can make, and what kind of API calls that we can make to a certain set of endpoints as well, right? Making sure that our front end is only making API calls to the intended sources that we want it to make API calls, right? So now, I mean, we talked about these things, right? Now the bigger question is, how do I make these headers in general, right? I mean, how do I find which values to put in which headers and all, right? I mean, is it rocket science? No, it is not a rocket science. It is a laborious work, I would say. So let's see how we can, how what approach which I followed in my company. I mean, what happened was, we had some business clients in general, and they had hired some of the security consulting company, and they were behind me. I mean, I was the cloud guy and they were behind me. They were like, okay, you have to block the patch call to, I mean, it was a simple static application. Still they were insisting that I in a simple static application, they were insisting that I block put and patch and delete calls and stuff like that. And they were, I mean, yeah, you understand, right? They have to justify this their consulting charges as well, right? So when they were behind man, and took a lot of time. So we went to a ethical hacking company, and we said, okay man, tell us everything that they might ask, so that we can implement those things in general, right? So I will tell what approach did I take, and how did I make sure that my the website of the web application of my company is actually A plus secure, so that next time they don't come and shoot arrows at me in general, right? So for example, it depends. It totally starts from the kind of header that I want to implement, right? For example, each of these headers, they have a specific use case, right? For example, if I say X frame options, it has a very specific use case. It means that what are the sources which I should allow, what are the sources which can basically iframe me in general, right? I mean, it is a more like yes, no. That's why I said, right? It is not a rocket science. It is more like a laborious work. We have to separate the cloud team, and you just have to make a list, and then you have to get it done. Once it is done, unless and until you are rapidly changing your JavaScript and CSS file again and again, I mean, you don't have to do a lot of work. Once it is set, yeah, I mean, mostly you're done, or you won't have to revisit it again in general, unless you are doing some very big very major changes in your application, right? So likewise, for example, if I say about permissions policy, right? So I know what kind of permission that my application will be using. For example, if I'm going to use the location from the user, I know I know that I'm going to use the location data from the browser's API call, and I know the if I'm using any of the third API libraries, they probably might have a documentation of how you can update your permissions policy header as well. Most of the, for example, if you integrate any of the video libraries, let's say Agora and stuff like that, which typically requires those sort of thing, they already have a documentation of how you can include their sources and all. I mean, they will just say, okay, just copy this thing and just add it in your header and it will just work, right? So again, depending on the use case, we might already have an idea that probably we are going to use it in that particular place, so we can just edit there and we can use it, right? So in my case, what happened was the front end was not very cooperative. So I had to take a hard approach. I just added a rule in the CloudFront distribution. I said disallow all, and then I started looking for the console logs. And in the console logs, it gives you very good information, right? Okay, that you cannot load JavaScript from this source because it is not listed there. Okay. So now I'm like, okay, I just copy it and then I update it in the header. Now I'm checking again. I mean, as I said again, it is a laborious work. You have to spend a lot of time initially, but once you are done, it is good in general, right? Likewise, same goes for the content security policy as well. Permissions policy header is something that is again it is something that is doable, but the CSP, the content security policy header is something that is very very laborious. Reason why I'm saying this, because if you have integrated a lot of third party systems, you don't know what API calls, what are the sources from where they're trying to load the JavaScript or CSS, or what are the endpoints from there they're trying to load the images or making API calls and stuff like that, right? So it takes a lot of time. You have to sit with, if you have a QA team, it is good. I mean, what I should do was I just updated it, and then I parceled my work to QA team. Okay, now tell me the. I just told them, okay, just you have to look in the console logs in this manner, and just give me the error list so that I can do it deployment and on a cron basis, like on an hourly basis, and they can figure it out in general. So that is one approach that you can also take. There are two approaches. Either you can go with the hard way that I went with, or you can sit with the front end folks and start documenting in a Confluence doc. Okay, these are the API calls. If you have needed any third party system, oh man, let's just list whatever things your API, whatever things your third library calls, right? And then from there we can also do it in general. So these are like some of the common approaches that we can do in general. Now how do we set those response headers, right? I mean, we know how to define it, how to calculate it. Now how do we set those response headers in general, right? So it mostly relies on two things. First of all, it as I said, it is essential to understand how it is deployed in general. The reason being is it is not a backend server. We have to understand it, right? In the backend server, what happens is we have the control of in the API call itself. We have the control of the response address in the API call itself. I can just make a middleware and make my server respond some of the predefined response address, and it will just work fine. But it is not the backend thing, right? It is front end. It is a static thing, and it does not compute on the go, right? So there are some headers that can be added in the HTML tag as well. I mean, we have meta tags in HTML, right? So we have an option to either add those tags there itself. I mean, there are some tags. For example, content security policy tag, the header is something that can also be defined as a meta tag, right? So if that is possible, you can define on the HTML code itself, so that we also have a source of truth as well, right? I mean, we can just by looking at the header, we can say that okay, these are the sources from where we try to load contents and stuff like that. But if you don't want to do that, we also have several other options. As I said, if you're going with cloud, right? If you're going with cloud, let's say if you're using any of the CDN, right? Usually because that is a good configuration that we either go with Netlify or we go with like S3 plus Cloudflare or CloudFront distribution, right? So in those cloud distributions or the cloud service provider that you're trying to use, usually they give an option of I mean, they're intelligent, they have been there, right? Some engineer might have scolded them, "Oh, we want to add this, give us an option," right? So they already have those options available. Most of the mature platforms already have these options that can be configured as well. So if you go with, for example, if you go with CloudFront, right? In CloudFront, we also we have a policy itself. I mean, we have a policy where we can define like whole set of response headers that we can attach with our CloudFront distribution. So any API call that you any of the render that that goes by the CloudFront distribution, that they will already have they will already have those headers and all, right? If you're not going via that, if you're not using any of the cloud providers, I mean, not using any of the cloud providing services like CloudFront, Netlify, and stuff like that, we either go with the simplest approach. Right? I mean, we take a EC2 machine and then we build and we put it there in behind an Nginx and stuff like that, right? So in that kind of configuration, we have to put those configuration. I mean, in that case, the job of returning the response header will be of the Nginx server. I mean, not of the static build, right? I mean, in the Nginx, I will add okay, for this location, whatever you're getting, if you're getting any of the AP call in this location, just return this set of address that I will define in general, right? And likewise, if you're going with Kubernetes already have an option to configure those things in the grace file that we define, right? I mean, we can pretty much define it there as well. So I mean, yeah, these are some things that we can do to make our front end secure. But does this mean we are going to trust the front end? No, we should not. Thanks, folks. This was my.